Welcome to Politically Charged. I'm your host, Alexandria, and today we're covering a pretty controversial topic, abortion. Joining me are Jared, Ellie, and Matt. And Jared is our residential pro-lifer, as per usual is our residential conservative. Now, you were pro-choice up until recently, is that correct?
Yeah, up until about a year and a half ago. I'd probably say, like, end of my senior year of high school, I probably became pro-life.
Okay, so then this will be interesting. I kind of want to start on definitions, so maybe where you changed how you defined yourself, we'll be able to find something in there. Ellie, since I know you're pro-choice,
yes,
could you tell me how you identify the pro-choice movement?
Yes. So in the United States, the pro-choice movement is the goal to achieve access for women to have safe abortions and other reproductive rights as well.
Okay.
So access to safe abortions, access to birth control to prevent abortions, and other contraceptives and other healthcare.
Right. And then, of course, there's another term for the pro-choice movement that's usually thrown around in more conservative
Yes.
spaces, pro-abortion.
Pro-abortion.
Do you find that at all accurate, or where do you find any accuracies?
For me, I don't like to use the two interchangeably because I don't want people to have abortions. Like, that's not my goal. My goal is not to abortion for you, abortion for you.
Right.
Like I want to give women the rights to have a safe abortion if they so choose, because no matter what, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's coat hanger abortions are terrible. Like, that should never be a thing in today's society. Women should not have to go through that by themselves. So they should have clinics where they can go and they can be safe, and they can have medical personnel and professionals have them assist them in their abortion.
Okay. And I guess on a last note, before we move to defining the pro-life movement, do you feel that the pro-life movement threatens any of the goals the pro-choice movement wants to achieve?
I feel like there are a number of people within the pro-life community that are very stubborn in what they believe, and what it boils down to with their opinions and everything that could prohibit in the long run what pro-choice is trying to achieve. But I don't think that everyone in the community is against. Everyone has varying levels. They could be moderate, they could be super conservative, super against abortions at all, or they could be in between because they don't know themselves where they stand.
So it's a gray space.
Yes.
And so then, Jared, as a pro-lifer, how do you identify the movement you identify with?
I mean, the pro-life movement is mainly, I mean, I wouldn't even really prescribe it as a movement. The idea of being pro-life is the fundamental and scientific belief that life begins at conception. When, biology, when sperm meets egg, when the child is conceived, that's when life begins. When Ellie talks about access and that, it depends how you define access. I don't mind if someone wants to go and pay for their abortion themselves. That's their choice. I can think that it's a wrong choice and kind of a reprehensible choice, but it's not my business to say. I can say that, but it's not my business to stop them. What I don't want to do is have either my tax dollars or any of that pay for these abortions. And when she talks about, for example, having access to cheap birth control and that, it gets thrown around a lot. Listen, condoms down at the CVS cost you about $12 a pack. Honestly. The idea that you can't find cheap birth control anywhere is just absurd.
But just because it's cheap doesn't mean that it's effective. There's the idea that, oh yeah, condoms are 99% effective, and one chance, what if it breaks or whatnot. But it's if you have a cheap condom compared to a decent condom that the government is giving out, cheap condoms suck.
Right.
Okay, so
like health services, right?
Yeah,
they give out free condoms, and people don't take them for a reason.
Right, and it's not because like they're uncomfortable or what because they're cheap. It's because they literally they don't work. They're not effective.
Well, I
so
mean,
if you're having a decent, if you're giving them like a decent condom or decent birth control that's gonna actually work and
I
do
thought you were
its
going to
job.
go down a whole nother route. I was so nervous there. Well, I mean, listen. I mean, statistically speaking, nothing is 100% covered. The only
Right.
100% way not to get pregnant is abstinence.
Right.
I mean,
But I mean,
that's
that's a
that's
natural
statistical.
a lot of the people getting abortions are poorer than other people. So a lot of the people in underprivileged schools don't get the same sexual education that people in more privileged schools would get. So some people might not even know how to use condoms or that they even exist, that they're even an option. So
I mean, I think it comes down to effective birth control. Are we really talking about abortion as a form of birth control, or are we talking about it as a medical necessity?
I in
I
no
mean-
way, shape, or form think abortion should be any sort of birth
Right.
control at all. Like you see people complaining about on social media, oh my God, that this person that I know just had like their third abortion. It's like that should not be happening. And the person that thinks that getting their third abortion is okay, like
Right.
that's not what I stand for. That's not what I think the pro-choice movement stands for. And I think that's like one thing that we share with like the pro-lifers is like people should not be using abortion as a form of birth control.
Right. Okay.
I mean, like when you're talking in conversation, no, nobody will outwardly admit that. But if one would want to be ideologically consistent and philosophically consistent, then, I mean, abortion is a very simple argument. Either you believe that it is a human life or either you believe it's a life or it isn't.
Right.
If you believe that it's a life, you can't do anything with it. If you don't believe it's a life, you can do whatever you want with it. It's like removing a tumor. So, I mean, in the end, I mean, the end result would still be the same when it came to viewing abortion as a quote-unquote birth control method. I don't believe that it is, but the end result is still the same in action.
Right. But then, of course, that's why it's still such a great topic, right? Because if it was so simple to just say, well, it is a life or it isn't, right? And now that we've defined it, we're done. But there's so many varied facts. I know that everyone has seen different doctors saying different things, different time periods when different people decide that life begins. What do you do then?
I mean, that's the reason that I became pro-life. I was arguing this topic, obviously, from the pro-choice side a couple of years ago, and somebody point blank asked me, okay, if you can define when this becomes a life, then I will agree with you. And the fact is that you really can't. Because, I mean, just in general here, just from like medical statistics and that, or medical evaluations of fetuses and that, by week 3, like the baby's brain and spinal column begin forming. I mean, that's when most women realize that they're pregnant in the first place. By week 5, the heart begins beating normally,
Right.
which can be of a different blood type than the mother's. By week 6, the nose, the mouth, the hands start forming in that.
Okay.
I mean, by week 8, ears begin forming. By week 10, you start growing fingernails, and that's all in the first trimester. So,
Right.
I mean, the argument is, I mean, when in there can you point when it's a human life or not?
So then it really comes down to what the main argument I feel like for pro-choice is. It's okay, even if you define it as a life, because sometimes abortions are necessary late term. And I like to talk about late term abortions because then it really does come down to medical necessity. In most states, a late term abortion is illegal unless it is imperative to the mother's life. So then at what point, how do you choose?
I mean,
I think for me personally, if it's of medical concern, especially to the mother and the mother's health, the mother's life is already the established life. So if what are the odds or what are the chances that if this child is born, through whatever miracle, like medical miracle, that they are able to come out into the world, and the mother dies, what are the odds that the baby's going to survive too? So now you've I don't want to say thrown away, but now you've given up the life of the mother who has already established her life for a baby that might not survive.
Well, also, I think we're moving into the like what kind of if the baby has defects or it can't breathe at birth, it's going to have to kidneys don't work, has to be on dialysis. Like, at what point are we talking about it being a medical necessity for the fetus to be aborted rather than a medical necessity for the mother? Because we have to think about how unfortunate of a life it would have, because a life living on dialysis for the rest of your days and a life not being able to breathe very well, that's not very much of a
Right.
life
That's
at
not
all.
a good quality life.
So, all right, couple of things to unpack there. So, we mentioned health of the mother first. I mean, when it comes to the pro-life side, yeah, obviously the health of the mother comes first. Like, for example,
Okay.
this happens.
See, that's different than most pro-life
No,
arguments.
we're pretty consistent.
that I've
on it.
seen.
At least every pro-life person that I've talked to.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on what you categorize as mother's health. Like for example, like when it comes to psychological health, for example, is the mother going to kill herself because she just became pregnant? In that scenario, if she becomes suicidal over it, I mean, in my view, the baby becomes sort of like, I mean, a drain on her, and therefore abortion is necessary. I mean, when it comes to like physical health, like for example, this sometimes happens. Like a woman is pregnant and then develops breast cancer, and if she gets chemotherapy, it's going to end up killing the baby. What do you do?
Right.
My response is that you get the chemotherapy, because I mean, your intrinsic well-being and getting well is first, and if the byproduct of that is that the baby it dies because of it,
Right.
then I mean, so be it.
But do you understand that despite the fact this is obviously a moral quandary, because you are weighing the value of life, and you're doing that by looking at the quality of life of both the mother and the child, so then do you understand that when you have to legislate a moral argument, and you legislate it with the definition life begins at conception, you automatically outweigh the value of the mother's life?
I think that you're sort of reading this as like a zero-sum game. I'm not saying that the common argument that's been made lately is, okay, you got like one 5-year-old, like you're in a burning building and you got one 5-year-old child sitting on one side of the room and like 10,000 embryos on the other side of the room. Which one do you save? I mean, if you choose to save the 5-year-old, you're not saying that the 10,000 automatically don't have intrinsic life to them or are valueless.
Okay.
It's not a zero-sum game.
But it is in policy. When you have to legislate, is abortion legal or illegal? It is a zero-sum game. Would you agree to that?
I guess I'm not following what you're getting at.
Most conservatives or Republicans who are strictly against abortion will only be against abortion because they believe that life begins at birth. They're not willing to consider that, like, there are other, that there's a gray area, like what you're saying, that like there is intrinsic value to the fetus itself, and then there's the intrinsic value to the mother's health, but like there's the gray area of like when one outweighs the other, in the sense that like the mother's health is ultimately going to be more important. They're like, no, there's life in you because you have this 3-week-old fetus. You have to deliver it no matter what, no matter if you're suicidal, no matter if you've got breast cancer.
I think
And
it,
that's like where they refuse to move.
I think we're going to do
Well-
some closing statements. So if we can keep it brief, and then we'll go
Okay.
around.
Yeah, like one 30-second thing
Yeah.
onto that, and then I'll close. I mean, one of the things that we always talk about the 3 like unfortunate cases: rape, incest, and risk of the mother's health. One of the problems, philosophically and argumentatively speaking, on how you argue that is that normally on the pro-choice side, it's normally used as an excuse, as though that's all of the abortions. Rape, incest, and risk of the mother's health constitutes only about 3% of abortions. So, I mean, philosophically, if everybody else can agree that the other abortions are bad, then that's a worthwhile discussion. But most pro-choicers just choose in order to use that as the exception in order to guilt other people into supporting a broader policy that they disagree with.
Okay.
I
But-
don't think that we're using it to guilt people in a sense. Like I would never say like, oh, you have to believe in abortion because people that were raped need abortion. Like that is like, those are the exceptions, rape, incest, and like you said, mother's health. Those are the exceptions to, like, those are like why we need abortion, because these things happen to people. But at the same time, there are people who are from like disadvantaged situations where they don't have a great enough education, or they're not like in a stable environment to raise a child. So it's like, why would you bring a child into the world that's ultimately going to have a low quality of life and suffer for it, when you can terminate the life before it even begins, before it has a chance to develop and have to suffer through the rest of its life because you are in a disadvantaged situation yourself.
But a disadvantaged, like starting from a disadvantaged point is like worse than having no life at all. I mean, I would still want to live.
Yeah, I disagree. I think people who are born into disadvantaged families, they still have a chance at making their
they have a
lives
chance.
better.
You say they have a
Okay.
chance, but
Well,
what,
I would
like-
love to come back to this, actually. So, thank you everyone for watching Politically Charged. We will come back to this topic and we will see you next week.